Hello and welcome to another episode of the Maverick Mystic Arts podcast. We'll be continuing with our exploration of Franz Bardon's initiation into Hermetics, Step 9, and we're looking a little bit today at healing. So during the course of this particular initiation and many initiations out there, we are often introduced to a number of frequencies or a number of spectrums, wavelengths, climbing our way up the vibrational scale. So we've looked at in this course so far vital energy, life force. We've looked at astral energy. We've looked at the four elements. We've looked at the four elements in relation to the astral and the mental. We've looked at the Akasha principle, and we've looked at light. And we have looked at the qualities of light that we can work into the mental, into the astral, and into the physical bodies. So, when it comes to using all of this stuff for healing, there's a number of ways we can go about that. So Bardon offers a number of options just as entry points for people to begin exploring this. Now, before we even touch the topic of healing itself, we need to look at the mechanisms that exist behind healing, or behind the one doing the healing. Okay, this is really, really vitally important. If we are doing any healing work, we need to be 100% certain that our ego is out of the picture. Okay, now this can express itself in a number of different ways. When it's in the picture, that is, it will express in a number of different ways. I receive notes from time to time from people who are wanting to learn how to heal and develop skills and access to energy, frequency, etc., the elements to heal a loved one. And this is very common. As someone that we care about deeply is very unwell, and we want to be able to heal them, to help them. Now, when I do receive these emails, the typical response is not what is expected initially, though from the feedback I've gotten from these people, it's been quite helpful, which is before you go about even beginning to attempt to try healing on loved ones, people you care about, we need to sort ourselves out. So what does that mean and why? Well, if it is somebody that you care for deeply who is ill, typically we are infested with a lot of worry, a lot of attachment, contraction, these anxieties, etc., that are really tied into our own relationship to this person, our own view of their health, what their health would mean to me, it becomes very self-centered. Even though it is to help another person, it is so often to help them for me, right? So it's very similar to when somebody that's close to you passes away, and you end up looking at over time, oh, well, what were the aspects of that living person that the living person allowed to flourish in me? So then it's not so much a grief very often of the person who's departed, but a grief of the aspect of yourself that person helped bring into existence. And so we have to look at this in relation to healing. Why is it that we want somebody to get better? And what are the dark tendencies with which we will perceive that person in relation to the healing? And by dark tendencies, I'm referring to the selfishness involved, the clinging, the attachment, the imposition. This is all a part of the process. So many healers, shamans, spiritual workers won't work on their direct family, won't work on those closest to them because of this. Now, so often this isn't really specified in a clear way in the mindset of these folks, the ones I've encountered and spoken with. It's just sort of a rule that gets put into the mix. But if we understand why that rule might be thrown into the mix, this can help us to eventually navigate beyond it. And the only way to do this is to evolve beyond those habits, those particular styles of clinging and attachment that we have for those closest to us. So really important that we sort that out, because what exists in the subconscious, what exists beneath the surface, will always be a part of the healing that occurs. Okay? Now, when you have, so that's for family members, etc. Now, when you have people who are healers as their work, very often there is a lot of pride involved, or there's a martyrdom involved. There's different subsets of different, what we might call pathologies of the mind or of the identity, which will infiltrate into the healing. So if you need to heal people because that is how you ascertain your value from the community and from yourself, then that's some clinging, that's some of your own identity that is getting involved in this healing. If your identity is that of a healer and that is how you perceive your own value and how you perceive that others perceive your value, then you will impose that healing on those around you, or you will impose, this is very common, you will impose the shape, the form of sickness, of deficiency on people around you. This is the same as people who do have a similar connection to, say, teaching, and will impose ignorance on those around them. So our values and our subconscious habits will start to infiltrate and infect the healing with those particular shapes and habits that we have. Okay, so really important that any system of energetic development or skill-based development, if it is to become a healer, to become a doctor, to become a teacher, to become, let's insert whatever you want there, that a part of that path, right from the get-go, is the dissolution of your own habitual attachments, right? A dissolution to your own ego, and to really look for and strive for the best apart from yourself for the people that you're working with or for. Okay? Super important. Do not neglect this. Otherwise, in your teaching, if you're a teacher, you will cause an incredible amount of harm. You will hurt many people over the course of your teaching career. If you're a healer, you will hurt many people over the course of your healing career. Again, insert whatever the vocation is that you might have there. Okay? So get your stuff together so you're as free from yourself as possible. This will allow for you to work through a deep equanimity and goodwill that will radiate from you. That exists apart from the need to pedestalize any aspect of yourself, or the need to condense or impose any particular shape on the person you're working with that helps facilitate your own value as whatever the chosen identity might be. Okay, so not usually the first thing that we would come across when discussing healing, but one of the most important things. I've mentioned this before. I called it Gandhi 2.0. There's that saying from Gandhi, be the change that you wish to see in the world. If you are working with people, you have to see the change that you wish to be in the world. So you have to allow for those shapes to be in use in the environment. You have to allow for that to be a potential in the environment. Okay? Okay, so now looking at some of the specifics of healing. Let's start with working the mental body, which is what Bardon starts with here, which is looking at essentially hypnosis. In this case, instead of a self-hypnosis or auto-suggestion, it would be for somebody else. Oops, I just tapped the mic there. Apologies for making excess noise. Maybe that'll make a difference. Anyway, so hypnosis for others or auto-suggestion, where you are influencing the subconscious of the person, and through that influence in the mental plane, you then, of course, will have residual influence through the astral body and through that mechanism into the physical body. Now, Bardon makes a clear point that the work that you do on the mental plane is how you help to heal or alleviate maladies of the mind, right? Issues which may have their causation in the mind, in the mental plane. If you want to affect the astral plane or work with healing the astral body, you would work through the astral plane, same vitally, physically. And that the only bridging mechanism is through the matrices. Now, I think anyone who's done a fair bit of practice will have come to the conclusion that everything is connected to everything else. Nothing exists in a vacuum, including space, right? Nothing exists in a vacuum. So because everything is connected to everything else, there's always residual effects and there's always bridging mechanisms that are occurring. However, if we want to work with this stuff in a more pronounced way, we want to consciously use those bridging mechanisms. We want to be very aware of those bridging mechanisms and use them. If we're not working consciously and of course openly with the forces at play, then we're doing one thing, right? And sort of guessing at the results or hoping for the results. The more precisely we can, once again, in an open way, work with everything. Hello there. What's that? Hanging out? Little bit of puppy love. Hey. All right. Get out of here, dude. All right. He's hanging out under the table, and he's gone. Okay, so the more precisely we can perceive what we're working with, we can perceive the different substrates of mind, emotion, body. We can perceive the actual blockages at play. We can perceive the connections. We can perceive the way that one trauma has built on another in different planes through those connections. We can perceive the identity that's involved in it. We can start to see the causational web that has facilitated this quagmire of sick in a person. So that is, we could look at this whole thing that we just mentioned here from the perspective of what do you see, what can you perceive? And this isn't merely perception, through the senses. This is perception through the tangible energetics as well. So you can feel into the stagnancies of the mind. You can feel into the astral stagnancies. You can feel into the physical stagnancies. You can observe the spiritual and karmic stagnancies. And you can start to see how all this stuff has wound its way and threaded its way together. Okay? Then it comes to how you end up working with that. And so we mentioned working the mental only through essentially like a faith type of healing or hypnosis type of effect. And this can be profoundly powerful. Bardon sort of underplays this, but there's a lot involved in a faith type of healing in terms of the integration, the union that occurs, the unification, and the openness. These are the two factors that create such powerful effects. Is the surrender, the giving yourself over. So that is the emptying of the identity, the emptying of the habitual forms and shapes of the matrices, and how those have held in the pathologies over the years, right? So we have an emptying, that humbling, that surrendering to a higher source, a higher power that comes through and reintegrates and restructures everything. So everything comes into a more harmonious union together. This union will be in a greater relationship to harmony, to health, to form, healthy form, harmonious form, healthy and harmonious function, etc., etc. Okay, so then we start looking at the use of the substances. For example, if somebody is very, very weak, right, and you can't touch them through their own cognitive functioning, so let's say they are unconscious, there's means of loading up the vital and astral body, starting from the base and working up instead of starting at the mental and working down. You start at the vital. You, through the vital, load up the astral, and that will invigorate the mind. And I have a friend who, I believe his father was in a coma just prior to death. I believe he grabbed onto his feet, loaded him up, and it allowed his dad enough time to wake up out of the coma. And his father and his mother were able to have their final interaction through that mechanism. Now, for some people, in some cases, that type of effect can be a cause for a more full healing. In this case, it was a cause for wakefulness, for a type of closure, I suppose. And then his father did return to unconsciousness a little later. Now, so that's a loading up of the vital energy. And so sometimes there are maladies that just because there isn't enough energy present, the energy is required for, other functions to try to deal with different disharmonies. So there isn't enough energy to go around. So different things will start to break down. So simply having enough vital energy, enough life force present can do wonders, right? It's a phenomenal tool. It's very, very simple. And it's a phenomenal tool. You have loading with the elements or working through the elements, right? And this can be done in contrast. So the example he gives, if someone has a fever, the contrasting element would be water to the fire of the fever. So you could load up the water element and allow that to use its own intelligence to help facilitate the alleviation of a fever. Now, just like when we are training, if you've been listening through this series of videos or podcasts from the beginning, you'll remember that we discussed closer to the beginning of this book how you build a resiliency in your personal training to the frequencies. The body has to adapt, right? The astral body has to adapt. The mind has to adapt to be able to function within these higher states of energy or these different substances. And so if we're doing a healing, we want to be careful that we're not loading somebody up, especially if they are weak, beyond their capacity to handle and through flow those energies. We don't want to burn anything out. Right? It takes energy for the tissue to sustain energy. So this is where it can be useful to do more frequent sessions with people and not load them up too much. So you're just sort of allowing the subconscious of the body, for the body itself to adapt to the healing, and for the subconscious to recognize that, oh, you know what? This is, I actually feel okay. And through more regular sessions, you get a subconscious identity that starts to arise that you are actually the type of person who does feel okay, who does feel better. And there can be a lot of value in these particular types of explorations. Now, downsides of multiple types of treatments and needing a lot of them is that it's more time, it's more money, and that's something that, not everybody has. So then we look at, okay, well, we can harmonize the elements. This is a way of working healing. We can look at causation, the Akasha. We have to be careful that we're not stepping on karmic toes here. So be aware of that. You can load with light. The more subtle the energy source, the more pervasive it will be, the deeper it will go, the more causationally it can work, because it's a more refined substance, so it permeates more deeply. Okay, now when we're working with healing, because there can be effects of the healing that seem negative, that's why one of the reasons we don't want to do too much at once. So if you have an identity that is built up about your own efficacy as a healer, sometimes you can do more harm than good, because you can do so much, say, cleansing work or whatever, that the body's response to it, its purging response, its reharmonizing and rebalancing response as it's ridding itself of the toxins, whatever it might be, sometimes that can take more energy than we actually have. So this is where these things can get a little more complicated, in the sense of including prolonged timing effects in the work that you're doing. So it's not all at once, but you load into the information of the lighter substance that you're working with, or within the paradigm of deity yoga, evocation, etc., where you hand the healing over to a deity of healing. If you're doing this more yourself, then to include some parameters that the energy that you're working with only works to the extent within the person's ability to handle it. And so then if you're going to be causing through the healing a healing response that requires a lot of energy, that you also include in the healing the extra energy that might be needed in a delayed time frame or in very direct relationship to the healing session and to the accumulation of health, etc. As that time goes on, that the excess energy can be used as needed for the healing. And so this can be loaded into the field of a person. It can be loaded into an amulet which you give a person. It can be loaded into the body of a person in a way that it has a time release type of effect. So these are things we want to consider, so we don't do too much too fast, right? To rid yourself of all of the disharmony within can be utter chaos as things are trying to swing back into harmony. So we need to be very, very aware of this, right? Any pride that a healer takes in super intense healing responses needs to be looked at. These are things that healers will use to pedestalize the identity on, to lean the identity on. I'm such a good healer. I worked with somebody once, they had all this crazy purging. Okay, well, how long did it take for them to reharmonize, right? How long until things were stable? So this is where the release function, when you're releasing these cohesions of sickness, right? These identities and cohesions of sickness at layer after layer. It's a little at a time, it's being released off, and it's in a dose that is manageable by the individual. The deeper in the hole somebody is, the less they typically can handle physiologically. The amount of stress induced by the healing process is monumental. And so it's not just, oh, I need to get stronger. It's the amount of energy consumed because of the healing that's taking place, right? And so that is its own type of exercise. Treat it the same way that you would treat, going to the gym, that you would treat any type of stress. Okay, then there's the, we could say, like the support type of role as well. So there's the healing specifically of what's actually happening in there. Then there's the supporting role of, okay, the stress that's coming out, can you help alleviate that stress of the healing? So a little bit more energy, right? Helping to harmonize the emotional and psychological imbalances that will arise as a result of the stress of the healing response. These are just a few small examples. There's the physical support of good nutrition, good sleep, right? Good thinking, a good feeling, right? Healthy, harmonious thinking, feeling, actions, practices, rest, all of this stuff that's involved. So we want to be able to consider as many variables as possible, right? The community that person might need to talk out, vent out their stress, how they might do that through words, if they don't have enough energy to do it through exercise. There's different sort of platforms or foundations that can be laid to make this easier. Healing is a very in-depth process. There's a lot that goes on. So if you're working with the elements, you're working with the electric and magnetic fluid, yeah, you can do phenomenal things, create phenomenal change and really potent healing effects. Sometimes though, when an identity has settled into, has adopted the mental, astral, and physical components of sickness, when it has more energy, when it feels a little more capable, it doesn't know what to do with itself, right? The identity, the entity doesn't know what to do with itself. And this can be another cause for stress. So what does a healthy person, what does this healthy person, if they feel good, what are avenues of through flow for higher function when they're feeling okay? And this is another important thing that is part of the energy work if you're doing it that way, or if you don't have that side of the skill set where you're helping with that through path and integrative functions and through flow functions of expression. But it's something that you would help to rewire or to wire in through the counseling side of things verbally to help give the mind a shape of what a healthy version of that human might do. So that when that energy is present, instead of freaking out, what am I going to do? There's some type of pathway that's been paved in the beginning for this slightly healthier person to start acting out that better health. So this includes all the good habits of health. It also includes expression of that through to the world around you, to other people. This could be through mediums like art and music, writing, etc. This could be through anything else, right? It could be through, starting a little bit of gardening, or whatever it is that might pique your interest, okay? So there's so much that can be said about this topic because there's so many variables. Some sicknesses seem to be karmically induced in a sense that they're part of this incarnation in terms of our own ability to move forward, right? That they are one of the causational impetuses for the evolution of the spirit in this incarnation and form. So because of that, they seem to keep popping up. Now you could look at this and go, oh, well, it's just not all the variables have actually been found, and maybe that's true. But there does seem to be some very, very common traits of condensed chaos through different types of illness when it comes to people who've been on the path for a long time. So perhaps it is issues with how that path is being walked, but there's also the collapsing of karma as you are raising in frequency, and how all that work that you do pressurizes the karma to start expressing itself more immediately and collapsing itself into the present moment. So we want to be aware of this so that we can really work through in a healthier way, and you'll start to find means of doing that. Of course, not giving up that, oh, this is just karma, but if something crosses your path that might be helpful, incorporate it. And if it's alleviates 1% of that condition or whatever, great, right? So just things to be aware of. Cause of illness, looking into the Akasha, finding the causal relationship to various pathology. This is a really, really interesting type of rabbit hole that we can explore. We want to be cognizant that we don't get too attached to this, that we don't get too attached to ourselves through this rabbit hole. Many, many people who hop onto the spiritual path for one reason or another start going down this rabbit hole of self-healing, and there's a hell of a lot of identity and pride that gets spun into our problems, essentially. Oh, I had blah 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 when I was a kid, blah blah blah, and I had this memory and that, and all this correlation starts to present itself, and this recognition of how and why you became who and what you are. And this is very, very easy to attach to. All of that stuff that comes up, it's observed, right? It's a part of whatever that moment is, but we don't want to take any pride in it. This will slow us down quite drastically. And because we don't necessarily, beyond what is necessary for the integrative processes, continue to feed those prides, feed that sense of victimhood or having overcome something or this or that or the other thing. These are all identity cohesions. So as the identity starts to dissolve and evolve and come into resonance with higher function, and higher beings and dimension and universal sort of cosmic connection, a lot of that stuff, the importance starts to wane, and through that a lot of the healing can start to occur, because those identity cohesions which are holding those pathologies in place start to dissolve. So the spiritual evolution has a very, very direct connection to the opening up of the health, or the cleansing of these different types of cohesions and pathologies. That doesn't necessarily mean that if you have good health, you are highly developed spiritually. It also doesn't mean that if you have terrible health, you are highly developed spiritually, right? These, again, are absolutely not so relevant. So, because everyone's working from a different place. At every end of every spectrum, right? So just be aware of all this. Okay? All right, that should be enough to get folks started with the healing. If you're going to be feeling into other people, this is so much more than imagining what's going on. The imagination is not just, it is in relation to the energy that's in front of you. Just like you reach out, you pick up a book, you put it down, you feel the book, right? You feel that tangibility. You have all the intricacy of how your fingers work, how they feel the edges, how it feels the weight of the book, how it feels that enough is within the hand, that the book won't drop, etc. There's a lot of precision inside that. There's a lot of tangible awareness. And the same is applied to the energy. So if you're working the energy with people, you need to feel precisely what is going on there, where the cohesions are. You start dissolving those cohesions, bringing the person into a stronger resonance with the energy you might be working with, or the harmony and function you might be exploring. And you work with precision, with openness, with awareness, and with goodwill, without attachment or pride, or essentially the identity-based need for that person to change. That clinging of that identity-based need will stagnate the process, stagnate the healing process, condense it, and make it that much harder to work with. Okay? So when it comes to healing, you look at yourself, you do a lot of work on yourself, a lot of work on your relationship to what it means to heal, right? And then you develop the relationships to the energy and skills necessary to begin to carry that out. This is done at its best through relationship, not through imposition, right? A relationship that is free of your own identity, right? Not through imposition on the person you might be working with, right? This is not for you to create value, your own relationship to your own value, or to start pedestalizing your own sense of self-worth. This is a relationship. The will to do good is paramount, okay? All right, I think that's everything for this little section. Thank you for your time. If you're interested in training, I have a workshop coming up this June 2025 here in British Columbia, Canada. So this is a Hermetic Alchemy retreat, a spiritual attunement retreat, levels 1 and 2. You can check the details out on the website. And I offer private coaching, private lessons as well. These sessions are 2 hours in length, so you can contact me if you're interested in that. And lastly, there are courses available on the website as well in Tai Chi, as well as in Qi Gong, meditation, and Hermetic Alchemy, along with the Q&A video reference library we call the Zenden. So you can check that all out on the website. And once again, thanks for your time. Hope you're enjoying these. See you next time. Bye.